computer.
Yes.
And here we are. It's my great pleasure to welcome Piero Parisetti to this interview. It was an honor to meet you just recently. I saw your presentation and thought, this is perfect for my longevity readers. That's right. I call the people who want to become long-lived while staying healthy, wise, and happy. That's what you have to do. And that's really a topic that needs to be addressed. So welcome, Piero.
Dear Enzo, I'm the one who should thank you, but let's not talk about honor because it's not like the king of Scandinavia is here. There's just an ordinary person with intellectual passions and interests, that's all. Nothing more.
But when you meet someone who can give you an evolutionary stimulus, help you understand things in a certain way, I am always grateful because it's not every day that you meet people who inspire you.
Thank you, thank you.
I created Longebility a few years ago, and I have a community of about 3,000 people, most of them over 55, over 60. And I try to share interesting content precisely to transform the second half of life, which is commonly seen as a downward curve.
It is now descending
into becoming instead an upward curve. And with Treve, we'll see if...
Let's talk about what really matters, because I'm part of Grey Power, a Facebook group for mountaineers over 55. I'm a modest but very passionate one, a mountaineer on rock, ice, and mixed terrain. And when I look closely at this remarkable group, I see incredible things that people are doing at 75 or 80 years old that I personally could never have even dreamed of doing at 20. So that is truly and deeply inspiring to me.
Yes, I really believe that it is clear that you need to have some ability to take care of yourself during your best years, but then in your later years, your third, fourth age, sometimes we ourselves mentally confine ourselves to a certain position. I'm less capable at my age now than the young people, all those things that inevitably life brings us. Of course.
Of course. So,
who is Piero Parisetti? Here I wrote down a couple of things that I'll try to summarize, and then you add to them. Okay, Piero?
Excuse me, here. There's a problem always that the curse is the bane of my life. My name is so long because I'm actually Piero Calvi Parisetti. First there's a Calvi and then there's Parisetti. Both of them are there, which is a bit, it's not like it's a big deal for me, heaven forbid, but that's how it is. In fact, as you saw on the website, it's Dr. Parisetti and that's it. Otherwise it becomes a mess. Anyway, go ahead.
Who is Piero Calvi Parisetti? I wrote down a couple of notes that I copied here and there. Dr. Parisetti is a member of the Society for Psychological Research and the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which translated into Italian would mean studies near death.
Near-death experiences, yes. The
near-death experiences. 2 professional scientific research organizations, so research is conducted in some scientific way. These near-death experiences, very interesting.
And not only that, actually, pardon me again, let me make a brief digression. The SPR stands for Society for Psychical Research, which includes, if we want to define it, both the study of what is known today as parapsychology and the study of human faculties that are well demonstrated but still lack an explanation within our current paradigms. And also the evidence for what appears to be the survival of the human personality after the death of the body. So psychical research encompasses these 2 things together.
Fantastic, fantastic. Even this introduction already makes me think that we're going to need more time to collaborate with the Institut Suisse de Sciences Néotiques in Geneva, Switzerland. So what is neotics then?
And actually, I'll continue. I feel like a teacher who says ta-ta-ta-ta, but in reality, it's noetic. Noetic science, there's the American equivalent. Noetic sciences are what is now commonly called holistic, meaning a field of research, a discipline that looks not only at the material aspects of reality, but also at those non-material aspects, which, contrary to what orthodoxy tells us, the world is made up of both material aspects, which certainly exist, but also of non-material aspects, which exist just as much. So noetic sciences deal with both of these aspects.
Perfect. And then I also noted down that you are currently pursuing a PhD at the University of, thank you, Northampton.
That is correct, or exactly right.
What is this PhD about?
This PhD program focuses on, so if psychic research, as we said, is research, that is, it produces results and information, my particular area of expertise is applied psychic research, meaning the application of what we learn from psychic research for some practical activity, for some practical benefit. I am particularly interested in using the results of what I call the science of the afterlife. It may sound a bit absurd, but that's what it is, the science of the afterlife, all the scientific research, which seems to indicate to us that there is an afterlife that in a way we do not understand. The human personality appears to survive the death of the body. This science has a very important application for two categories of people. People who are afraid of death, whether their own or perhaps that of a loved one. And of course, people who are grieving the loss of a loved one. These are people who are suffering. One group suffers from anxiety, the other group suffers from pain, from depression, from grief. And the message that says, look, a rational person, so not a religious person, the religious person, they have their faith and believe certain things because that's what a sacred book says, because that's what the teachings of their religion say. I am not a religious person. I am a person of science, and what I call my rational faith in the afterlife is not based on belief. It is based on knowledge and critical evaluation of the facts. I have studied many facts from about 10 independent areas of research, and they all point toward this conclusion. Quite incredible, however, for me and for many others. Inescapable, I don't know if that's the right word in Italian, but in any case, there's no way around it, that in some way, death as we understand it, that is, death as cessation, as disappearance, as a black veil falling and then nothing beyond, well, that's not how things are. This is a big message of hope, it seems to me, for these two categories of people.
The tremendous message of hope. Also because, Piero, what I notice is that when we live, especially in the second half of life, we think about it a bit more with the worry that everything will end, about death. In some way, we're on the defensive. We play defense with life, so we can't even truly live.
To enjoy it, absolutely.
Because it's like someone who shuts themselves inside the walls. They stay there, protecting themselves on the walls, putting up barricades, instead of cultivating their own creativity, their own well-being of evolving, and so on. So, but fundamentally, why is it that we don't talk more about this topic? In general, in your opinion?
That's a very interesting question. Enzo, look, from my personal experience, remember you heard me speak at that conference last week? And there I was telling exactly what happened. That is, I am a doctor, then specialized in disaster medicine, and I had a job in managing humanitarian crises. And then I taught at the university for many years, 17 years. So I was born, raised, and trained in this environment that I have called materialism, because that's what it is. Academia is essentially dominated by materialism. This dominance extends to the press, to the media, including semi-scientific publications. Someone who has scientific interests, who buys popular science magazines, that is, science outreach publications, finds only materialism, and let's remember materialism. It says that everything that exists is matter. If we can't touch something, if we can't measure it with instruments, it simply doesn't exist. And I was, at the time, entirely comfortable with this specific worldview for 34 years of my life. Now, we don't want to get personal here, but it was actually a simple anecdote that my wife told me when we were in Geneva that set me on this path, truly an intellectual adventure that I believe has seen me read to date about 30,000 pages of literature. I became a member of these scientific societies. I attended conferences, study days. I interviewed researchers. I even personally trained with Dr. Raymond Moody, who in 75, so we're talking about 50 years ago, was the first to write specifically about near-death experiences. And so with this journey, when I get passionate about something, I really throw myself into it. It was a very intense journey. I realized that as part of this intense journey, I discovered that once a paradigm is established in a conversation, it doesn't get touched. Don't try to convince the skeptics. There's nothing you can do. We could talk about this at length, but we're not here to have a discussion about the philosophy of science. We're here to talk about more practical things. The more practical things tell me that, for example, at dinner with friends. In any social situation, as soon as it's established that you can talk about these things without being considered crazy, a visionary, or a bit odd, like that guy believes in some wild stuff, everyone has a story to tell. Everyone, well, not everyone, but a large part of people have an anecdote, an experience, or often even multiple experiences. Personal stories that tell us that psychic powers like telepathy, precognition, even psychokinesis, that is the influence of the mind over matter, exist and are real. There are so many channels, so many experiences that show us that people are aware of, have experienced the fact that in some way the human personality survives. But none of this is talked about. It took me a long time to get to answering your question, why isn't it talked about? People have these experiences, but they don't talk about them for fear of being ridiculed. The scientific literature exists. Thousands of publications in journals that we call peer-reviewed, that is, scientific journals. There's the whole process of they have to be reviewed by other scientists and so on. Then the articles get published and are ignored by the orthodoxy. I'm not saying the orthodoxy is monolithic because there are some major cracks. For example, I work in a university department, about 30 people who deal with this, so there are some significant cracks. There are some big holes in this block. But let's say that more generally, the orthodoxy claims that these things don't exist because they can't exist. They accuse us of having faith, but they have a faith too, and their faith says it's not possible. And so I ignore the evidence, even if the evidence is produced using the same scientific methods used in any other branch of science. And if I can't ignore it, I actively suppress it. So I create ridicule towards the researchers. I try to prevent publication. I try to prevent funding. This research, it's a sad situation, but unfortunately ideological battles happen. We have this idea that science is this perfectly flawless thing where only the scientific method exists, etc. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Science is a human activity, and like all human activities, it is subject to what one believes. If someone believes one way, they go in one direction. If they believe another way, they go in another.
What you're saying really resonates with me because I also find myself with friends, both male and female. This topic is fascinating. Everyone in some way asks themselves big questions, but probably the vastness of possibilities of answers given by religions, by occultism, puts us in such a state of discomfort because it's something so immense that we prefer perhaps to talk about it only with someone very close to us. But not to open up too much because there's also the fear of making a mistake, of saying something like, I don't want to come across as ridiculous or be seen as crazy, because maybe I say that the soul exists, someone else says paranormal powers exist, but since I don't know enough about it, because it's not as tangible as a bottle.
Yes, forgive me, it's not as tangible as a bottle until you see a ghost. And we say, well, that person saw a ghost and just imagined it. Maybe they're on drugs, or they're an alcoholic, or they just want to show off. No, if you have the patience and determination to look at all the anecdotes, all the research and so on, among other things, we discover that it's not just a few people every now and then. Research from Uppsala University in Sweden tells us that 70% of those who have lost a husband or wife, in the first month after the loss, 70% of people report an experience of communication with the deceased person. Communication that can be, I had the impression that they were there. No, many times I saw them in the flesh. They spoke to me or touched me on the shoulder, or I heard sounds, a voice, things like that. These experiences aren't that rare, but people don't talk about them for the very reasons you mentioned, because they're afraid to say anything. Poor Piero has lost his mind. He sees ghosts.
We first met at this truly fascinating event that was organized by Marco Cesati Casin, though, which was a deep exploration, all about the mysteries of our past lives. So this brings with it the idea of future lives. It brings with it the idea that beyond the mind and body, there's something else, which some people call, I don't know, soul, monad, or something like that. So in the presentation I gave, I said exactly that. The experience here is of the soul. It is truly the journey of the soul, which dresses itself in a body and a mind to have an experience and passes through different lives. Can you help me complete this picture? Would you like to add your own perspective?
So right now, for you and your entire group, and for all the people who are currently listening to us, I really need to make a very important clarification regarding this matter. My primary role as a professional scientist is not to simply provide explanations, but to carefully examine the evidence, to systematically catalog the evidence, the proofs, and the established facts, to conduct research and draw conclusions from it. And I keep myself very carefully away from any kind of explanation. Do you understand? I want to say this because even in the convent, we heard some things that personally, I'm speaking only for myself, made me a bit uncomfortable. You know what I mean, right? Because when people start talking about it's the qua, it's the quanta, it's the quantum field, and that was just leave it, as they say in Milan and also in Ticino, just leave it there. If theoretical physicists don't understand quantum physics, are we supposed to understand it? So let's have the courage to say, I don't know. I don't know what the mechanisms are, the modalities, how it's possible to explain it. What I do know is that these things happen. So having made this important premise that I'm not here to provide explanations. My role is not to give explanations, much less to be a guru, a spiritual teacher who has understood everything and says, this is how it is and that's how it is. So all I can really do is cite various reliable sources, and those sources, in fact, I even wrote an entire book about this specific topic during the global pandemic. Our listeners are familiar with the Lonely Planet travel guides, which are very well known in the English-speaking world, but I understand they're also well known among Italian speakers. What is a guide? Lonely Planet? It's a guide to, let's say, Thailand, made by people who have actually been there. Lonely Planet doesn't have its own journalists. It simply collects, compiles, and distributes notes that travelers send in saying, I went to Bangkok, I visited that neighborhood, I saw this interesting thing. That thing was less interesting. They put it all together and make the guide to Thailand. I tried to use the same system to make a guide to the afterlife, and this isn't research. My research is something else. But I thought it was interesting to try, not to answer me, but to have my sources answer some of the questions that you ask me, and that in the end everyone asks themselves. And here I don't take a position, I don't say that I completely believe what's written in the book, etc. But I find it very interesting that such different sources, and I'll explain them in a moment, if I may, by historical period, affiliation, religious or non-religious, cultural, language, etc., and they are also truly sources, people in very different life situations. All of them basically say the same things, and I find this very interesting. These things, moreover, are generally in contrast with the teachings of many of the world's religions in the world. In short, so who are my sources for this book? My sources are three. They are three categories of people. First of all, those who have had a near-death experience. The near-death experience is an absolutely fascinating and profound phenomenon that I could talk about at great length for about a day and a half, but I will try to summarize it for you in just a few short words. In a variety of situations, the most well-studied one as I mentioned at the conference, is the one that follows cardiac arrest, but it's not the only one. There are a lot of other conditions, accident situations, various things in which basically a person no longer has a functioning brain. It's not that brain activity is reduced, there is no brain activity at all. And you've heard me explain this in detail. Here we don't want to waste our listeners' time, so please be patient. For the purposes of this discussion, take my word for it, there isn't any. Not only is there no activity in the higher centers of the brain, but there is also no activity in the oldest, most ancient, and deepest structures of the brain. There is no brain activity for 5, 10, 15, 20, even 25 minutes. And if these individuals who have undergone such trauma are resuscitated after this period, they frequently report a profound and vivid experience that they describe as being significantly more real than the ordinary physical reality that we inhabit every day. It is an experience that remains remarkably consistent and very similar among all the different people who have it. Here we are talking about hundreds of thousands of documented cases, well documented around the world. There is a whole body of extensive research on this. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it now. Anyway, in short, these people it seems that for what we're discussing here, they were able to catch a glimpse of what appears to be an afterlife, what awaits us on the other side. And then they came back and basically all tell the same things, not in the details, but it's as if you, me, and 10 other people had gone to Rome. At different times, we come back and all tell the same things, even if, of course, we use different words to describe the Colosseum or St. Peter's and everything else. But the experience really seems to be one had by people who have no brain activity. That alone is amazing, extremely interesting. So, source number one is people who have had a near-death experience.